Welcome back, dear friends, to the story of me and you. Today, we invite you to walk with us through a mystery that blurs the lines between life and death, the spiritual, and the real. It's a story of fear, surrender, and ultimately, profound transformation. This is not fiction. This is the journey of Phil Roiz, a man who died, but came back with a mess. It was an ordinary night in Texas, a place where the heat lingers even after sunset and the silence of suburbia feels almost too still. Phil Roiz, a 34-year-old warehouse supervisor, wasn't expecting anything unusual. He had been fighting a nasty bout of food poisoning, nothing more, nothing less. Just another rough night, or so he thought. But something shifted. Weak from relentless vomiting and dehydration, Phil dragged himself to the bathroom. He needed the cold of the tiles, the quiet of solitude. He didn't plan to die. As he leaned over the bathtub to splash cold water on his face, another wave of nausea struck him with brutal force. His head hit the ceramic wall. Hard. The world spun, and then everything faded. The silence that followed was not peaceful, it was terrifying. He fell. Not metaphorically, but physically. His body collapsed, unconscious, slumped awkwardly in the tub. Water slowly started to rise, creeping inch by inch, pooling around his arms, his chest, his face. And Phil wasn't there to stop it. Sage the world needs to hear. Later, doctors would say he technically drowned. But what science could not explain was where he went during those terrifying minutes when his lungs were underwater and his heartbeat stuttered near zero. What makes this night unforgettable is not the medical emergency. It's what came after. The moment time stopped. The moment he realized he wasn't alone. This was not a nightmare. This was the beginning of something far greater than death. Phil didn't wake up gasping for air. He didn't wake up at all. Instead, he appeared, suddenly and inexplicably, standing in a small room, no bigger than an average bedroom. The lighting was soft, like twilight bleeding through a half-closed curtain. The air was thick with a silence that wasn't heavy but deep, as if every sound in the universe had taken a breath and paused. There were walls, yet they didn't feel solid. The corners of the room melted into a strange emptiness, as though reality itself hadn't fully formed here. And then he saw them. Other people. But they weren't in the room with him. They were in other rooms, just like his, separated by invisible barriers. Some were standing, others were sitting or pacing. No one spoke aloud, but he could feel their emotions, their confusion, their grief, their longing. A man on his right was groaning, holding his stomach in pain. Phil somehow knew this man had died the same way he nearly had. From food poisoning. Their souls must have entered this in-between realm at the same time, like passengers disembarking the same doomed train. To Phil, it felt like an eternal layover, a kind of cosmic airport terminal, but without announcements or directions, just a quiet knowing that everyone there was waiting for something they didn't fully understand. That's when he noticed a presence, a woman, not physically near, but spiritually close. Phil could sense her anguish more than see her. She wasn't mourning her own death. She was mourning the death of her mother. And yet, she had a child of her own and didn't want to let go of life. Phil didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But in that moment, he loved her like a sister. Her grief curled into his own chest like smoke finding new lungs to live in. This was not a place of punishment. It was a place of pause, of souls suspended, waiting. Not out of fear, but from something far more complex. Unfinished stories. And that's when the silence cracked. A strange vibration filled the space, like the hum of an engine about to start. Something was coming, or someone. Phil felt it before he saw it. The vibration grew louder, not in sound, but in sensation. Like the moment before lightning splits the sky, when the world holds its breath. Phil stood still, alert. Everything inside him whispered, "Something is coming. Pay attention." And then they were there. Two figures entered his space, not by walking through a door, but by simply being there, as if the walls had folded inward to let them through. They were tall, upright, undeniably humanoid, but they were not human. They had no hair, no beards, no mouths that moved. Their skin seemed to shimmer slightly, like it belonged to neither light nor shadow. And though they didn't speak with voices, Phil understood them perfectly. He didn't know how, but the words came, not to his ears, but directly to his mind. One of them, the figure on the right, tilted its head slightly as if puzzled. What is he doing here? The thought voice asked, though no sound was spoken. He doesn't belong here. He's not supposed to be in this place. The second being turned toward the first, and Phil felt a ripple of urgency, like papers shuffling in a sudden wind. Without hesitation, the second one replied, "Send him back. Take him back to the bathtub." There was no ceremony, no trial, no divine thunder or booming voice. Just a decision delivered with calm clarity. And then Phil was falling, not physically, but spiritually, through what felt like a tunnel made of pure light and sound. It wasn't warm or cold, but familiar, like returning to a place he hadn't realized he missed. He didn't see God, he didn't see angels, but what he saw was enough to rewrite everything he thought he knew about death and about life. This wasn't the end, it was a mistake. And something had corrected it. It wasn't peaceful. There were no harps playing, no glorious re-entry. Phil came back the way most people are born, with struggle, with pain, with confusion. One moment, he was surrounded by light and silence. The next, he was gasping, choking, his lungs on fire, his face submerged. His body thrashed weakly as water filled his nose, his mouth, his ears. It took every ounce of instinct, every buried survival reflex to move even a little. But somehow, he moved. His fingers found the edge of the tub. His knees slipped against the porcelain. He turned his head just enough for air to explode into his chest. It wasn't a full breath. It was a scream. A desperate, silent scream for life. Water spilled onto the floor. His arms trembled as he pulled himself up, coughing uncontrollably. His vision blurred, every muscle screaming in shock. But the room was familiar. The tiles, the old bath curtain, the shampoo bottle still tipped over on the ledge. He was home. He was alive. And the silence of death had been replaced by the chaotic music of survival. He sat there, soaked and shivering, lungs heaving like bellows, trying to understand what had just happened. He should be dead. He was dead. But something, or someone, had said no. Phil didn't cry. Not then. He didn't fall to his knees or look to the heavens. He just sat, trembling, quiet, staring into the water like it still held the secret of where he'd gone. But inside, something had shattered. Or maybe something had awakened. For the first time in years, he felt small. Not in a way that belittled him, but in a way that made him part of something larger. Something deliberate. He had been pulled back, not by chance, but by choice, and not his own. In the days that followed, Phil didn't tell anyone. Not right away. How do you explain that you died and came back because two faceless beings said you didn't belong in the afterlife? He didn't have the words. But even if he did, who would believe him? So, instead of speaking, he listened. To the silence, to his breath, to the fact that he was still here. Food tasted different. Sleep felt sacred. Even the light filtering through his kitchen window in the morning seemed like a blessing he'd never noticed before. Something had shifted. No, everything had shifted. Phil quit chasing promotions. He stopped checking his bank account 3 times a day. The desire to succeed, as defined by money, status, and competition, just didn't fit anymore. It was like putting on a shirt that no longer felt like his. He still worked, still paid bills, but it was different now. He smiled more, he listened more. He even started helping at a shelter on weekends, not out of obligation, but because people mattered now in a way they hadn't before. One evening, a friend asked, "What happened to you? You're different." Phil didn't know what to say. But after a long silence, he finally replied, "I died, and I was told it wasn't my time. So now, I'm living like I borrowed this day, like I owe someone something precious." The friend stared at him, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or believe. Phil didn't push it, he just smiled. Because some truths aren't meant to be proven. They're meant to be lived. For years, Phil kept the story close to his chest, not out of shame, but out of sacredness. Some experiences are so intimate, so raw, that they feel almost too fragile to survive the weight of public judgment. But as time passed, something inside him began to stir. A quiet voice, the same kind that had once told him he didn't belong in the afterlife, now whispered, "It's time." So, one day in 2022, he sat down in front of a camera, not a production crew, not a big studio, just a small recording for a YouTube channel called The Other Side NDE. And he told the truth. He spoke gently, not with drama or need for attention, but with the softness of someone still in awe of what they'd lived through. His voice trembled only once, when he spoke of the woman in the waiting room, the one mourning her mother and holding on for her child. "I didn't know her," he said, "but I loved her pain. It made me realize death doesn't stop love, and maybe neither does time." He paused, let the silence breathe between his words, and millions listened. In the weeks that followed, messages poured in, from strangers, from skeptics, from the grieving, from those on the edge of despair. People wrote to thank him for his courage, yes, but more than that, for putting into words something they had felt but never dared to speak. "I lost my son," one mother wrote. "Your story didn't bring him back, but it brought me back." Phil didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a vessel, as if the message had never been his, but he was entrusted to carry it. Phil used to think time was something to manage, an invisible clock, always ticking behind your goals, your career, your obligations. But now, he says, time feels more like breath, not something you own, something you receive. "Before," he said quietly, "I lived like I was running out of time. Now I live like time is offering itself to me. Gently, generously. Each moment feels deeper, slower, more honest. A walk isn't just a way to get somewhere, it's a conversation with life. A meal isn't just fuel, it's gratitude served warm. Even silence isn't empty anymore. It's full of permission to simply be. He doesn't fear death anymore. Not because he understands it, but because he understands that it's not the end." "I don't need all the answers," Phil said. "Just the awareness that I'm part of something wiser than me." He no longer asks, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead, he asks, "What am I supposed to do with this gift I've been given?" It's a question that doesn't have just one answer. Some days, the answer is simple. Hold the door open, smile, call your mom. Other days, it's harder. Forgive someone who never apologized. Sit with your pain and not run from it. Speak when it's easier to stay silent. But always, live like it matters. Phil still walks the same neighborhood, still drives the same car, but he's not the same man. "I didn't survive death," he says. "I was sent back, and that means this life. It's not just mine anymore. It belongs to something bigger, something I may never fully understand, but I can still honor it." Phil never asked to become a messenger, yet here he is, standing on the uncertain border between ordinary life and extraordinary truth, offering what he has seen to anyone with ears to hear and hearts to feel. He begins every talk with the same quiet confession. "I don't tell this story so you'll believe in me. I tell it so you'll believe in yourself, in love, in purpose. Because that is what survived the water, the waiting room, and the tunnel of light. Love and purpose. Ferocious, unstoppable, urgent. When people ask, 'So what now?' What do we do with your story?" Phil smiles, a gentle curve that holds oceans of meaning. "Start small," he says. "Tell someone you love them. Today, not tomorrow. Forgive sooner, laugh louder, pray, or meditate, or walk beneath the stars. Whatever lets your soul breathe. And when fear whispers you're alone, remember, a stranger you've never met was once pulled back from death so you could hear this." His voice cracks, then recovers, carrying a raw, steady hope. Phil knows skeptics remain. He welcomes them. "Doubt is healthy," he says. "Just don't let it harden into cynicism. Keep a window open. Light needs only the smallest crack to get in." He doesn't preach doctrine, he offers invitation, an open-ended question each listener must answer in the privacy of their own conscience. What will you do with the time you've been given? It is late evening when our interview winds down. The Texas sun has melted into shades of copper and violet. Phil steps outside, barefoot on the warm concrete patio, and breathes in the twilight. "I don't know how many days I have left," he whispers, eyes reflecting the first star. "But I know each one is on loan, and debt or gift must be honored." He looks back at us, a silent challenge shimmering in the dusk. "Honor yours too."